This land of snow-clad volcanoes is home to giant brown bears. It's called Kamchatka and lies in Russia's far east. But the bears are not alone. There are strangers on the land. Until recently, Kamchatka was closed to outsiders, but now, with its borders relaxed and the economy crumbling, the bears are coming increasingly under fire. First impressions can be misleading. Despite its menacing appearance and the roar of its engines, this Soviet helicopter's mission is bear-friendly. Its crew are scientists who want to preserve the bears, not persecute them. They're mapping out bear movements across thousands of square kilometers of Kamchatka's inhospitable landscape. The easiest way to track a bear is by fitting it with a radio collar, but first, they need to sedate it.
Go in, Victor. Take her. She's a good one.
The man about to dart the bear is researcher Bill Leacock.
When we do get off a good shot, the drug Tilazol usually puts her to sleep within 5, maybe 10 minutes, sometimes even less. Yulia, looks like the Tilazol's worked. But make sure she's out. I really don't like darting bears. I feel like I'm betraying their trust. But this is the only way we can get good data on bear movements.
Bill Leacock is a long way from home. His research is funded by New York's Wildlife Conservation Society.
Our research team is made up of 2 Kamchatka biologists, Ilya Shevchenko and Alexander Nikinorov, and myself. We've been working together for several years. We've got the whole operation down to a T.
Okay, down. Yeah, she's pretty small, and we're gonna have to bring it in all the way, I think, on the last notch here. We'll try it. We'll just cut some of this off first to check. This will take one position every 9 hours. And that'll give us a lot of information on her, if it does get that many positions. Ilya, could you take her temperature? I think that's just fine. Okay, she's all right. She's got about 14 breaths per minute or so.
Once we have the collar on the bear, we must weigh her before she recovers. Adult bears here in the sanctuary can weigh up to 600 kilograms. But this is a young, small sow. It takes us about 1 hour to do all of our work on the bear. Then it is time to let her recover. We'll check back with her to make sure she's safe and coming round all right.
The Kamchatkan winter lasts for nearly 7 months. But well before spring is on the horizon, new life has already begun. Deep in a snowbank, under a protective canopy of alder roots, a pregnant bear dug her den last November. Although she mated last summer, the fertilized embryos didn't begin to develop until she was in the peak of condition when she entered her den in the autumn. After only a 3-month pregnancy, the newborn cubs are a tiny fraction of their mother's huge size. In the coldest months, there's no food available for Kamchatka's bears. They spend most of this time asleep underground. But as winter comes to an end, they start to leave their dens. With the bears now active again, Bill Leacock is able to resume work in the South Kamchatka Sanctuary. In this vast wilderness, some 2,000 square kilometers in size, the team have a chance to study the bears in a natural environment, something which is no longer possible in many other places where brown bears live.
Kamchatka is a relatively unspoiled land, largely without the massive highways and the cities and the other human debris that's knocked the hell out of brown bears in Europe and North America. And bears are such great creatures. In the spring, it's like seeing friends again after a long absence.
There she is.
This male is trying to convince the sow that he'd be a good mate. At first, she's not quite sure, but after he starts acting almost like a playful cub, she warms up to him.
During their big sleep, the bears have been living off their body fat. When they first leave their dens, they're still in good condition, but deep snow still covers the land. Under these conditions, even the red fox finds food hard to find. With their enormous bulk, the bears need a good deal more than a fox to fill their bellies. Even if they dig beneath the thick mantle of snow, there's nothing for them to eat. But at this time of year, there's a much greater threat to their well-being: bear hunting. In Kamchatka, bear hunting is legal outside wildlife reserves. The hunters come largely from abroad. The members of this party of wealthy Americans are paid handsomely to travel to this wilderness with one aim in mind: to shoot the biggest bears they can.
This is a good bear hunt. 3 meter bear.
What's his name? 3 meter?
3 meter.
Bear. 3 meter bear.
Morning, and the hunting party is ready to set off. There are hunting seasons in both spring and autumn. In spring, with snow still deep on the ground, the hunters have the advantage with their motorized sledges, but it can still take a lot of searching to find a suitable bear.
Yeah, I see. Climbing up straight up the mountain. Yeah. I can see with my binoculars now.
Where is he? Right in the middle of that fish.
See that one ridge right there?
Yeah, that black
He's
one.
He's to the left, yeah, to the left of it in that dish.
Yeah.
In that little draw there.
That,
He's climbing straight up.
get it better there.
But the bear is too far away, so the hunters move on.
It's a big bear.
Big bear?
Yes. Very big bear.
At the end of several days hunting, 2 bears have been shot.
Nice bear, Jack.
This probably be my only bear I'll ever kill. And I'm getting so old that this probably be my last chance of ever killing a bear. But I've always wanted to kill a bear all my whole life, and it's the first one I've ever killed.
What I'm going to do is a full body mount because I believe the animal deserves that.
1,000 bears are shot legally each year in Kamchatka's hunting reserves, but it's becoming more difficult to find good-sized bears. This group are lucky. They all have a trophy to take home. Kamchatka is one of the Earth's volcanic hotspots. It's on the Pacific Rim of Fire, where 2 plates of the Earth's surface overlap. Here, active volcanoes still belch forth among hundreds of dormant cones. Because its crust is weak, the Earth's heat is close to the surface. In some places, the land is seething with life. In a hidden valley, geysers pump boiling water, and there are hot springs and bubbling mud pools. Spring has already arrived here because the Earth's heat produces a microclimate of warmth, and in the mineral-rich soils, plants grow rapidly. Bears are attracted to the valley floor, seeking out the flush of new grass. It's their first proper food of the year. Sometimes they feed very close to the hot springs and geysers, but they're careful to avoid the scalding fountains of water they produce. Kurilskoye Lake is an old volcanic crater, and on its shore a small settlement of cabins is home to scientist Bill Leacock and his family.
My family and I usually arrive in April or May, well before school is out. So my wife teaches our daughters, Grace and Nina, back at the camp.
Bill usually doesn't have very far to go to work.
The easiest way for us to track bear movements is from out on the lake itself. My colleague Ilya is a well-known marine mammal specialist. His 10 years studying sea otters has made him the best boatman I've ever seen, which is important in these unpredictable waters.
Here, why don't we go ahead and cut it, Ilya, and I'll try and get a reading, okay? Go ahead and turn her off.
Each of the bear collars emits a different signal, so Bill and Ilya know which bear's movements they're following at any given time.
There, we've got a signal. Maybe it's 25 or 26.
This year, Bill is trying out a new contraption to allow him to catch and collar any bears which come close to his cabin by the lake. It's called a culvert trap and was originally designed in North America for catching nuisance bears in the national parks.
The culvert trap works like this. We've got a bear wandering around. He gets a good whiff of the rotten fish in the trap. He comes up to it, probably rather cautiously. We've got a little bit of bait spread around. He might snack on a piece here and there. He might pick it up, chow down on it a little bit. He sees the real meal back there, crawls in. Probably grabs it with his paw. And then we got a bear.
In spring, Kamchatka's rivers become rushing torrents of meltwater. But even in May and June, the mountain slopes are still snow-covered. It's only now that female bears start to bring their new cubs above ground. The cubs are now 4 months old and still suckling from their mother. It's quite a noisy affair. A female bear normally gives birth every 3rd or 4th year. She often digs her den beneath tree roots which provide a natural roof. Bears also den in caves and rock crevices. The female eats snow to quench her thirst. The cubs are starting to explore the world outside the den, always under the watchful eye of their mother. A hawk owl keeps a close eye on the playful antics going on below. Each day, the cubs are becoming a little more lively, but their mother is still very much in charge, and every so often she sends them packing into the den. A pair of willow tits are excavating a nest hole nearby. Later, they'll line their nests with bear's hair collected from around the den. Soon the cubs are strong enough to follow their mother. After 2 weeks, the family will leave the den for good. Because male bears are the biggest threat to young cubs, For the next few weeks, the mother will keep her family high above the snow line, where in the deep snow she can easily outpace them. The enormous peninsula which is Kamchatka juts into the North Pacific Ocean. Almost totally surrounded by the sea, it has a very long coastline with its own rich wildlife. In spring, bears often come down to scavenge along the beaches. They'll eat almost anything, including kelp, shellfish, and all manner of things thrown up by the fierce storms of winter. They're even thought to catch sea otters sometimes, and to feed on the carcasses of walruses and seals. Bears are known to be indiscriminate scavengers. Bill and Ilya are curious whether they could have been tempted by a rotting whale carcass.
Looks like a fin whale. Hey, how long has this been here, do you think?
Maybe 2 weeks.
There's been a few bear here, Ilya, not that many yet, though. Man, these rocks are slick with fat. Look here where the bears have been clawing in at it. Been dragging it off. There's fat over there. They haven't broken into it yet, though. Kind of smells like my borscht.
But the bears seem to have deserted the whale in favor of tastier fare. Thousands upon thousands of little fish are being washed up along the beaches. They're a type of smelt called capelin, and they arrive in a 3-yearly cycle to spawn along Kamchatka's coast. As the huge shoals of little fish come close inshore, they become stranded along the tide line. The bears, with their powerful sense of smell, soon know when there are fish on the beaches. The capelin bonanza attracts bears from far and wide. A lot of the fish become buried in the sand at high tide. As they start to decay, the bears dig down eagerly in search of them. Even when feeding, bears are always aware of what their neighbors are doing. When a huge bear swaggers onto the scene, the dinner party scatters. When capelin are being washed up, the bears sometimes gather in unusually large numbers. Although often thought of as antisocial loners, Bill Leacock sees them in a different light.
Many people think of bears as essentially solitary creatures. And if they do meet, they fight. From our observations, we've found that it is usually quite the reverse. In many cases, they seem outright affectionate.
If brown bears are more social than people think, even Bill would admit that there are definite exceptions. Mothers with cubs will not breed again this year. But adult males will sometimes kill young cubs so they can breed with the mother again and father her next litter. So mother bears are very wary of big males. The enormous male has recently been in a fight. He makes the others nervous. But he's not looking for trouble. Soon, all the bears will be moving towards the lakes and rivers for the peak of their year. The annual salmon fishing season is about to start. In Kamchatka, July sees the start of the annual run of sockeye salmon, or nirka, as they're known in Russia. The salmon return every year from the Pacific Ocean to the rivers and lakes to spawn. It's an important date in the bears' calendar, too. The salmon run provides them with a fast food takeaway of protein-rich fish. As they gorge on the salmon, the bears start to replenish the fat reserves they've been living on since last autumn. Fishing skills come with age. Younger bears must learn how to catch their own. For scientist Bill Leacock and his family, the fish season is their best opportunity during the year to observe the bears at close range.
You see Venus over there, Grace? She just ran right over there. See her? Take a look. I thought she was marking the tree, but she isn't. She's just sitting there looking for sockeye. Yeah, just being lazy. Incredible. She's probably 120.
Only after being in the company of bears for hundreds of hours have we been able to build up a certain harmony, a certain trust. Bears have their own code of conduct. We try to imitate it. They know what they can expect from us, and we can read their behavior. They end up carrying on with their lives right around us. Very rarely do bears come to actual blows. They usually take steps to avoid fights, especially at the fishing sites. Each bear is an individual, though. We've come to identify their particular quirks. For some reason, one sow, Vivian, has a real antipathy for another, Venus. She always has.
While most of the salmon spawn in the lakes, others travel on into the rivers and streams. Here, the females hollow out depressions in the riverbed to lay their eggs. But many no longer reach their spawning grounds. Poachers are estimated to take hundreds of thousands of salmon as they make their way into the rivers and lakes. It escalates the problem already caused by commercial overfishing. Salmon poaching is also very wasteful. The male fish are discarded altogether, while the females are slit open for their ripe eggs known locally as red caviar. Once they've been stripped, they're dumped. Salmon poaching is becoming increasingly rife, even in protected areas like the South Kamchatka sanctuary, where Bill Leacock studies his bears.
Poaching of both bears and salmon has become a serious threat to this sanctuary. Look at this camouflage netting. Look at the rafts. Look at all the metal that they brought in here. This place was built for 3 people. There was a wood-burning stove in here. Before we came here and destroyed it, there were 14 barrels of caviar. Obviously, this stuff had to be brought in by helicopter. It has to be organized at some higher level.
In Kamchatka today, there's a thriving black market in red caviar. Most of it goes to Moscow and Japan, where it commands an increasingly high value. With soaring prices, more and more salmon are being prevented from reaching their spawning grounds each year to satisfy the insatiable demand for their eggs. But since the near collapse of the Russian economy, people in Kamchatka, as elsewhere, are being forced more and more to rely on illicit means to eke out a living. This is my father's house. He left it to me, but I have no money to make repairs in order to leave it to my descendants. It is a picture of the wrong use of our natural wealth. We bury fish, yet live in hardship. And of course, if there are prohibitions on fishing, people who have relied on fishing to sustain them throughout their lives will be forced to contravene these laws and become poachers. But they are only poachers in name, for fishing is their traditional way of life. Despite poaching, the salmon struggle to continue their age-old migration upstream. But in the shallow rivers, they make easy pickings for the bears. Vivian's cubs have been watching from the bank. They know whenever their mother has caught a fish and quickly join her. Now, in their second year, they'll continue sharing her catch until they become independent in a few months' time. One cub is smaller than the others. Bill knows that last year Vivian accidentally crushed its leg. The accident stunted its growth, and now the cub doesn't always manage to get its fair share. In between fishing sessions, the bears rest to digest their catch, while younger ones have the chance for some play or even courtship. Bill has found that mothers with cubs tend to use the smaller rivers, which, although they contain good fishing, are rarely visited by the adult males. Here, their cubs are safer. This litter of 4 has only just come down with their mother from the den they were born in on the higher slopes. The mother bear is feeding on willow. Even at the height of the salmon run, bears like to vary their diet. Kamchatka's rich natural resources mean female bears here can often produce 3 or 4 cubs in a litter. The fishing season gives Bill extra insight into the bears' lives.
When bears gather along streams, we sometimes see ones we've already collared. Our telemetry work has shown that the sow we've called Sputnik is faithful to a very small home range. We first met Sputnik when her cub, Edith, was 5 months old. At the same time that we collared her mother, we also fitted Edith with a miniature ear transmitter, because she was too small to be fitted with a collar. One day we were on the Vechenkia River, and my wife Tip noticed that something was wrong with one of Vivian's cubs. Last year when the cubs were little, Vivian fell on the smallest one, breaking his leg. Boris, the middle-sized cub, hobbled into view. Now his leg was broken. This section of the river was becoming crowded. Boris couldn't keep up. He often got separated. There wasn't much Vivian could do. Soon Vivian is off fishing again. Then Tank shows up, a big male. It's the first time this year we saw an adult male on the river. It figures he shows up the day Boris is crippled. Boris can hardly climb a tree to escape. It doesn't matter though. Tank is his usual self, only interested in catching sockeye. Vivian returns and the cubs calm down. Bears have an amazing capacity to survive and to heal from horrible wounds. But still, we didn't hold much hope for Boris. We didn't think he'd last a week.
It's not just individual bears which face problems. Large numbers are being killed annually, a combination of both legal and illegal hunting. I killed this bear 2 years ago. I bought a license, went to the hunting area, and shot him while he was feeding on berries. I needed a bear so that my family could eat meat. Of course, if a person has riches to hand, you won't part with them. Everything depends on getting money and how much wealth you can obtain. Bill and Ilya have found bears are now also being poached for their gallbladders. Bear gall fetches a high price as Chinese medicine.
Dead bear. It's a young one. Ilya, take a look at this. Looks like it was shot through the head. Doesn't look like a bear's been feeding on her.
And this time, they've even found another bear nearby.
Can you believe this, Ilya? 2 dead bears in about 20 meters.
Both animals.
Both of them slit right up the abdomen. Yeah. What a sad and cruel waste.
a reproductive pair, so we've lost reproductive potential. All I've done is sliced open the abdomens on both of them, just taken the gallbladder, and left everything else to rot.
By late August, the main salmon run is coming to an end. After they've spawned, the fish die. Some bears, like Vivian, learn to dive down and retrieve them. The salmon she brings to her cubs may now be days or even weeks old. And the cubs seem to have lost some of their appetite for salmon too. They're no longer in such a hurry to join their mother every time she brings a fish ashore. Amazingly and against all the odds, the family is still intact. The injured cub, Boris, has survived the intervening weeks, and now his leg has healed almost completely.
In the course of our work, we've become very attached to these bears. But we never forget they are wild animals. They're not the Winnie the Poohs that some people portray them to be. I don't believe they're man-eating killers either. They're just trying to get on with their lives. And we should treat them with respect.
The short Kamchatka summer will soon be over. Now for the bears, with autumn around the corner, fresh challenges lie ahead. Autumn is the time when Kamchatka's nomadic reindeer herders, the Aven and Koryak peoples, collect their herds together ready for the move from their summer pastures. Only a handful of these people are still refuseniks, unwilling to surrender their traditional way of life for a colorless urban existence. Instead, they still count their wealth in reindeer, which provide them with all their needs, including meat, milk, and hides. Even the reindeer's antlers are valuable. They're used as medicine in many Asian countries. Because the antlers consist of bone which is regrown annually, they can be harvested quite painlessly from the living deer. These people are also fur trappers, hunting wolverine, fox, and marmot. Although they occasionally kill bears too, they have never had any real impact on their numbers, unlike modern hunting and poaching. Now, though, it's time for them to leave the higher mountains and move their reindeer down to more sheltered pastures ready for the winter ahead. In Russia's far east, the summer lasts only 2 months. Already by early September, the alders and birches of the tundra are changing color. For the bears, too, it's a time of change. They've switched from a diet of fish to the new crop of fruits and berries, but they're still adding to the fat reserves they've already built up from the weeks of eating salmon. They're now in peak condition, with new, thick winter coats. And before the winter, there's one more harvest to come. Thick stands of pine bushes cover the tundra, and now their cones are ripening. The nuts inside the cones are rich in both protein and fat. In pine bush thickets, the bears frequently break off from feeding to scan their surroundings for danger. The family doesn't wait to find out if the strange bear is friendly. In a few weeks' time, the bears will start to seek out their winter dens again. For the Leacock family too, the season will soon be drawing to a close.
Come on, Munchkin.
But while the bears are still active, Bill can monitor their movements a little longer.
One with the male cub that we also found. And that's a 1.5-year-old.
Increasingly, we're wondering whether the bears we've come to view as friends are going to have a future. If the poaching of salmon and bears continues at this alarming rate, we have a real feeling they won't. But I'm convinced that the Russian people, with their love of bears, will end up solving these problems.
By November, the first snows of winter have already arrived. Even as the rivers freeze, some late salmon are still running upstream to spawn. Afterwards, like all the others before them, they'll weaken and die. Stella's sea eagles lead the cleanup operation. The salmon remains provide a lifeline for the huge eagles and for other scavengers throughout the winter. The bears are largely absent. Scraps of fish won't sustain them through the coming months, and many have already entered their winter dens. Adult males remain active the longest, and it's sometimes midwinter before they retire for their winter sleep. The bears will eat nothing until they emerge in spring. Then the cycle begins again. Next summer, the salmon will return and the bears will feast on them. Now snow and ice reclaim Kamchatka's forbidding landscape, freezing out all but the hardiest creatures. And while the blizzards rage and the scavengers eke out a living, deep in their dens underground, the bears slumber on, safe, at least until next year.